I will pause there. Recording in progress. So yeah, we record all of our speaker series to ensure that we can kind of circulate them for those who couldn't attend afterwards. So good morning everyone from windy and sort of slightly miserable Auckland, but I'm delighted to be here with the incredible Helen Klisser During as one of our world classes for our speaker series today. For those of you who haven't come across KIA before, we've been around for about 20 years. And kind of our role of KIA is always been around connecting, our community of Kiwis from all over the world. Helen, who we're talking today, is one of our world-class network, and also as one of our kind of Kiwi returners who returned back to New Zealand in the last couple of years. And to introduce Helen, she is an art advisory, curator, and photojournalist who's championed global art projects for the last 25 years. You're an ambassador of AUT and co-founder of the AUT ArtLAB, which is a cross-disciplinary group of creators, academics, and developers working at that really interesting intersection of art, technology, and science. Also, as an art advisor, Helen has a client base that have come to you through many, many years of activity in the art world, with your work in curating exhibitions, working with galleries, working with museums and major artists. And also Helen has an incredible newsletter, which will pop in at the end of the webinar, called the Art Cafe blog, What's Hot and What's Not in the art world, which is a fantastic read. Recommend everyone join and sign up. So yeah, Helen, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning, and lovely to hear about the art behind you. It's phenomenal to kind of see. And so look, I'd love to hear a bit about your journey and kind of what's brought you here today.
Well, kia ora, Ellie, and kia ora, everybody. And thank you for this opportunity. 8 o'clock in the morning. If you wear glasses, please keep them off. It's a bit early. But anyway, no, I feel very blessed to be back in New Zealand. I think perhaps like many overseas Kiwis, we don't call them expats, that's way too colonial, but that have spent many years overseas, as I did, close to 33 years. There's always an undertow of yearning to come back. But the longer you're in the country of choice, as I was in Connecticut, the States, and now from Manhattan, the more difficult that becomes, because if you're a completely passionate, hardworking, vested in whatever you do, you then have a huge network of colleagues, friends, some family, and it becomes more and more difficult. For me, the pandemic was a blessing in disguise. I had no choice. I happened to be here at the eve of the pandemic. But to go back, I left New Zealand in 1986. I don't even want to do that math. It might actually be more than 33 years ago. And that was with my former husband, Matt During, who had just graduated from medical school in New Zealand. And he had a medical fellowship at MIT/Harvard. And it was supposed to be a 2-year OE experience. So Matt was hugely successful as a neuroscientist and then in the biotech world. And I had luckily landed on my feet in Boston and asked a distributor for Pepperidge Farm, where he was picking the bread up from, because my background was in the bakery business. I was the marketing director of my family's bakery, Klisser's Bakery. Vogel's Bread is probably the name you still all know. And I ended up working for Pepperidge Farm for 5 years as a marketing manager, through that sort of just brazen hello, where do you pick up the bread? And 5 years and 1.5 children later, I got a call from my parents. We've sold the bakery. You've what? And so my first family of colleagues was actually Pepperidge Farm. There was an incredible group of colleagues where, you come in the morning at 8 in the morning. I left I had 6-week-old baby. So I also had colleagues with little babies, and then that 8 o'clock was really to 8, wasn't really a full on start. It was more sort of like, kinderkerche, children, religion, and it's the kirche part, the church, and the kitchen, all of that support group was there. Anyway, it was a big shock when my parents sold Klisser's Bakeries to Goodman Fielder, because I'd always assumed I'd go into that business. My background was in the arts. I had a BA in art history from Auckland University, and I had been studying a part-time MBA, but I had assumed I'd be in that commercial world. So being quick to try and see what my next move was, my other deep passion, apart from bread, was the arts and how to get there. And that was a natural sidestep. Dear friend, her father started Tyler Graphics, who printed works by Roy Lichtenstein, Frank Stella, David Hockney, Robert Motherwell. And I ended up working as a broker for Tyler Graphics in New York State and putting a little ad in the local paper in Westport of a baby screaming by Roy Lichtenstein, feeling that this would attract New Yorkers that had relocated to Connecticut to raise their families, and that worked. And then a dear friend, Emma Gibbs, Dr. Emma Gibbs, who is a New Zealander, and her parents needed help at auction at Christie's and Sotheby's. And so I ended up on a couple of projects for them at auction. I'd never been to a Part 1 auction, and it was not so easy, because the Part 1 auction, you essentially have to mortgage your house to get in, even though it's priceless. But luckily, my father, Helen Klisser, knew the director of Christie's Amsterdam. And so I was able to get a seat in the main gallery and bid on a work and secure it. Essentially, wow. Auction is he with the most money wins, but as long as you've been go in with the price and not the underbidder, you've done your job. And also to do all the checking in on provenance and the quality of the work, and whether it's a painting or a sculpture, to make sure, one, it's authentic, and two, it's not got any damage. Anyway, so fast forward, very lucky that Jane Cunliffe, who is the New Zealand Consul General, Trade Commissioner in New York, she became a friend, and she very kindly asked me, anytime a New Zealander was in New York, would I have time to run them around the galleries? And I met many New Zealanders that way. And to my embarrassment, very dear friends now still tease me that I forgot that I met them in New York, running them around Gagosian and David Zwerner Gallery and you name it. But my connection to New Zealand, I felt, was always there, faint but there. And I think that the icing on the cake was having Kia in New York, and really an amazing program with Jeff Andrews and Phil Veal and Craig, but also with the Neville Mannings offering their amazing penthouse for top-notch speakers from New Zealand. So I think that for me was very precious. The being in America, I wanted to be an American. I wanted to, I was straddling the fence in my heart, but I was, my family's here, my parents, my sister Jack, and brother-in-law Kerry, and my son Max moved here with his partner Eleanor, and my other sister Sarah was in Europe, she's back. But family is really key, but that's here. But my family in America were really colleagues and friends and community. So I think always, just really, what can I do in the States that would give me personal, meaning? And very luckily, a friend, Eve Stockton, mentioned that Silvermine, which is a 100-year institution, 5 galleries, art school of 4,500 students, and a guild of artists, cranky artists sometimes, but hardworking artists, really needed a gallery director. And I sort of thought, Silvermine, middle of New Canaan, no way do I want to be in some sort of regional place. I'm in, you know, America, I want to be in New York, I want to work as an art advisor, which I was doing. I was working as an art advisor to Art Dubai. I introduced Alan Gibbs in New Zealand to Richard Serra, Solowit, Zhang Wang for the creation of the sculpture park here in Kalgopa. But to raise 2 little boys as a solo parent, to have an anchor and a steady income was really key. So I took a look at Silvermine and I saw at least 100 cars in the parking lot. And I thought, all these people are passionate about art. They were taking classes, not necessarily interested in the galleries, which were purely representing regional artists that might never make it to MoMA. So anyway, I thought there's an opportunity of bringing New York art up to Connecticut. So the first show was called A Little of Chelsea, New York to Connecticut. And that was at first why I meant cranky artists. They didn't want to see work from New York, from the hot galleries. They were wanting work of, you know, their own art. And so I learned how to balance it, to show that by bringing, you know, major artists up. So the one show was called Rembrandt to Ryman, works on paper. People would come in to see all these works, the Rembrandt, the Matisse, Picasso, Dürer, and perhaps they could afford it and perhaps they couldn't, but they could then go to another gallery and see marvelous work for $250 or $1,000. And so that was sort of the marketing trick. So, you know, so it was to bring in something of great value and for there to be another story to be told beyond that first story. So I think that was my, you know, big lesson, because I was working with Carlos Dyer, who's a former director of MoMA. He was an artist and he was very, very unhappy when I brought in this New York art. And he was the installer for the family of Man. So I really needed him. But, you know, after a couple of years, I was able to think, no, I have to do my own thing here and believe in having a dialogue of mix and matching. And I think maybe like many New Zealanders, we do that culturally, to mix and match, to keep a window open, to have a dialogue and to look inwards and then express outwards. But that was anyway, Silvermine. I then went back full-time into art advisory until I was invited to become the artistic director of Westport Arts Centre in the heart of Westport. And Dad, actually, Mum were there, and he said that, you know what, this is so great. It's a smaller space, but it's in the heart of a city, heart of a town, and make the most of it, which I did. I was able to then work with the Westport Playhouse that Paul Newman founded, the library, really dig in deep with the community and create an artist collective where in between exhibitions, that collective of 150 artists could do what they wanted with the space. They could curate their own shows. So there was buy-in for those artists to then have an expression and also meet once a month, like an AA meeting, a show and tell, and share, you know, also resources and be of support. And it's very active to this day, especially through the pandemic. But it was finding a way to get full engagement from the community when I did bring in shows such as a Christo exhibition. So Jean-Claude and Christo, I exhibited the two of them at Silvermine in 2005, and then later at Westport Arts Centre, sadly, Jean-Claude had died. They did the gates, they wrapped the Reichstag. major artists, but they come in for one night for the opening. You have a whole month of programming, and then what do you do? Who's there? But usually the community. So what do you do for the community? So I think the programming of any exhibition was really key, the storytelling. And I think that's what I learned and continued to develop with Mary Hines, who both of us were very frustrated with the local shooting at Sandy Hook and the tragic shooting. 21 children died. What do we do? The Second Amendment's never going to change, but how can we, do something in the arts? And we created a foundation, a not-for-profit called Unload, which is essentially a platform using the arts, visual arts, performing arts, working with the Hartford Police, gun amnesties, decommissioning guns, asking major artists to help with this program, working with regional artists, working with homeless shelters, where they're veterans in Bridgeport, that working with kids who had suffered gun violence. And Mary's husband is a congressman, Democrat, and very outspoken. But I think remembering Kevin Roberts, who is the CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi for many years, you've got to be on the court to shoot a goal. To make change, you have to be part of it. And so, who knows if that needle shifts, but at least we had an opportunity to speak with gun owners about safety. And at least we were able to take 1 or 2 guns off the street. And also have a platform for all voices to participate in discussion, conversation. So that was a hard thing to leave, but that was, so it's full throttle working as a member of the Connecticut Arts Council, working for the Whole Art Foundation. They have an amazing castle in Germany called Schloss Dönneberg. I'd curated 4 shows from their collection. They lent 160 Warhols to the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. Amazing friends and art collectors with great vision, and especially because they wanted me to help them. No, but for their opening of Schloss Dönneberg, that used to be George Basilitz's castle, there are 7, exhibitions running at the same time that the Venice Biennale opened, Documenta opened, Munster opened, and I'm missing one, but anyway, we opened, and then to host the art world there and to be placed there for 6 weeks. So it was a very rich life. My kids at this point had grown up, and Max has moved to New Zealand when he was 18 to go to university, and Zach had gone to Indiana and then back to Connecticut. So, I was free to do anything. And so your question, like then coming back, it was not intentional. It was absolutely not. So that and then what? I'm not a spring chicken.
Yeah, it was an interesting time that brought so many people home, I think, and kind of, I think we've talked before about it being quite a reflective time and coming back to New Zealand. And so, yeah, you've come home, and tell us a little bit about your experience in returning and some of the work that you've been doing, particularly, you've co-founded the AUT ArtLAB.
Yeah. And that was fantastic. So essentially I was the international ambassador for AUT. And that was a 4-year contract that Derek McCormick, who is retired now, had given me that platform in New York, and that was great. So coming back to New Zealand, I was a bit concerned because I came at Christmas, as I always do. Mum and Dad were now 95 and 92. frail and old, and the biggest stress in my life was saying goodbye. You know, you just don't know. And so I stayed for my nephew Elliot and Lange's wedding, February 2nd, and Helen Clark, who's a very dear friend who I met in New York when she was the administrator of UNDP. And also I went on photo assignment with Helen to Rwanda and Malawi, documenting the trip for the UN. And I'd also been documenting for Americas in Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, Dominican Republic on these overnight airlifts, and also documenting in Haiti after the earthquake. But you know, more importantly, Helen had become a great friend. Peter was her husband, was Davis. Dr. Peter Davis was living here, and Helen was in New York. So she's passionate about the arts, and so I would invite her and run around museums and galleries, introducing her to museum directors and curators, artists, traveling throughout the Northeast, visiting museums, Mass Mocha, meeting Tom Kranz, who I just mentioned earlier, whilst we're setting up, the director of the Guggenheim, all sorts of people, but also going to the opera, going to the theater, and skiing, cross-country skiing. So she said, Helen, I wouldn't rush back if I was you. This is at the eve of the pandemic. So I stayed, and my sister Jack and brother-in-law, incredibly generous, said, look, you've got this cottage, you could stay here, there's no rush. So my youngest son moved into my house initially in Connecticut, because I left it, you know, so I'd been there 30 years, but 4 bedrooms, car in the garage, you know, Western Connecticut, incredible friends. I assumed I was coming back. So we're all in a lockdown. I loved walking along the rocks from Milford to Takapuna to see my parents every day. And because I didn't have a family, I was in their bubble, so to speak. So I could cook for them every day and go shopping, you know, that fearful trip into the supermarket, and listen to the waves and the birds, and extend myself to the neighbors, but meet the neighbors essentially on those walks. But most importantly, had an issue with, you know, my contract with AUT. How do I honor that? And Derek says, the Vice Chancellor, whatever you did in New York, do it here. That's as ambassador. And that was my magic carpet back to New Zealand. It gave me a nest, and then who is incredibly important and still is Professor Pari Keha. And he is the Dean of School at AUT, and he found a space at AUT for Joseph Michael. And one of the greatest omissions so far in my talk is not mentioning Joseph. So Bob Harvey introduced me to Joseph Michael 10 years ago, amazing photographer who had worked at Weta Workshop, but out on his own, traveling the world, traveling to Antarctica. He'd projected collapsing icebergs on the outside of the Auckland Memorial Museum. Anyway, he received a green light 2019 to project icebergs on the outside of the UN. And he had about 6 weeks to get the funds, which are considerable, you know, like $400,000. And so Kia was very good. We hosted one meeting. Ronnie Peters was marvelous, and we had sort of, you know, all the world-class Kiwis at this meeting, but essentially we really needed significant funds. So when I was in, what I did do was really reach out to foundations. We raised that money, and Joseph, with Rian Sheehan, composer, with an incredible team of really dynamic young creatives from New Zealand, were able to project collapsing icebergs that on the outside of the UN, Voices of the Future. And it was the same time when Greta Thunberg walked through the streets of New York. So anyway, Joe was the artist in residence at AUT. We then invited Geek Taketti. We have an incredible space where we can have projections. We're sort of interested in whales from Tonga, migration, Amazon. Chelsea Winstanley was invited to be artist in residence. She's just releasing a film called The Territory. Joe worked on a film during the pandemic called Amazon Raised Up Sky, where he could not go to the Amazon, but worked remotely. So he presented this film 10 museum sites in New Zealand, including the Civic. And then we had a very, amazing program afterwards. But all of these presentations with the film included VR and AR. So at AUT, to use new technologies in immersive experiences is what I think is exciting for the future. As you see people going to a Van Gogh, at Spark Arena or the Dali show, it makes huge impression to see this work and tell a story. What you want now is the actual work. So how do you marry the two? How do you give it substance? So anyway, the Art Lab was great. And then I was invited to join several boards, and being keen to have a deep dive back, I've said yes to everything. And everybody said, you're mad, and they're quite right. They're quite right. But Helen Clark Foundation is a great board. Indian Ink, John and Joe Gow. John was the early producer of Cats and Les Mis in London. He has a sculpture park in Waiheke, Connells Bay. He invited me to join Indian Ink board. So on and on it goes. So Bob Harvey has another project with an interactive museum on the waterfront. So, and Dick Hubbard has another project with an immersive, another great museum space in Queenstown. So it's meeting really creative, visionary people. And then people like Pam Ford at Auckland Unlimited, really reaching out, would you like to join a panel of returnees? How do you see the future of New Zealand? Or Sir Peter Gluckman is writing, his sort of report on the arts in New Zealand. So, and I was at the same time hosting dinners for the Helen Clark Foundation in the cottage and then in my home, but with the people that are non-partisan, with a hearing different voices. So that was my entry back. But it's an exciting moment in New Zealand history as well, where we, I think having been away for 30 years, coming back every year, maybe hosting a cocktail party for friends, mostly in the arts, or interest in the arts, but that doesn't do it. We have such a rich culture that I'm excited about really digging deep and learning more. And the Yuki, who's representing New Zealand at the Venice Biennale, has had enormous amount of interest in her work. The Nigel Burrell curated an incredible exhibition.
Yes.
And at the Auckland Art Gallery, which is contemporary Maori art. Art and object space, both are actually good. But object space, I met a marvelous Maori carver who printed this aitiki digitally. So but to see, where New Zealand's going, it's really, on steroids, much like coffee culture. It's so sorry, I should have let you ask more questions, but.
No, I'm kind of going through some of the questions and kind of you're moving through them quite, in that way. And I think it's really interesting. I think a lot what has been really interesting for us as Kia, a lot of our returners have returned with, a real focus on giving back and building community, and you know, kind of trying to amplify the work and what they do. I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about that from your perspective.
Yes, no, very much so. I think that the hope is to give back. You know, I think for me, and it's the greatest gift anybody can be given is an introduction when you're ready for it, a good introduction, and not a transactional one, a genuine, authentic introduction where both parties can benefit and grow. And I was blessed with those introductions in the States. I think my father and mother were blessed with those. My father arrived in New Zealand as a Holocaust survivor. You know, £4 in his pocket.
Gosh.
Maybe it was £8. He didn't know a soul. He was orphaned. His parents and brother died in Auschwitz. He didn't know anyone, but he had the benefit of his dentist's introduction to Dr. Reisenstein. You know, so that's how that goes. And, you know, and from that trajectory, he met my mother, who was visiting her cousin when he wanted a sculptured loaf of bread on his delivery truck. You know, anyway, fast forward to have introductions. If I can provide introductions, and I think Kia does this. This is, you know, when you're in New Zealand or going to New York or London, you know, your world changes with the right introduction. And the same is true coming back to New Zealand, where there's an opportunity to give back. I think you know, to sit on some boards, to provide insight and hard work and dialogue and conversation. And there's so many New Zealanders that have stayed in New Zealand that have done so much, and to have some insight to what they've been doing and how they've been doing that. And you know, New Zealand, Aotearoa, has transformed and is to be inclusive and needs to be inclusive. Certainly with Māori and Pacifica, and AUT has an incredible program of outreach to really provide education to Māori and Pacifica, where they can be huge change makers within their own community. And then my son's partner, Max's partner, Eleanor, she could choose any university, and she was living in Mumbai, but she chose both Auckland University and then AUT for engineering. And now she's a lead engineer at Rush. So to have, you know, and then her best friend, who was an architecture professor or assistant professor at Mumbai, she came to AUT to study spatial design. So how do you know, help an institution and with introductions back to the private sector, back culturally to internationally. So yeah, I think it's very true. You want to give back. I think if you're able to come back and able to find a house, move back, then you know, it's one of the highlights, one of the many highlights. You know, number one highlight, seeing my parents, they're still alive, and to be with family, but have my son Max and Eleanor come over and watch dreadful movies, Blackbird, you know, scary movies, not chick flicks, but on a Sunday. But is to really, you know, host a dinner with artists. And there was Lisa Rihanna and John Reynolds and Judy Miller and Grace Wright, all, you know, outstanding artists, Ali Lieberman, composer, and you know, and then just after the dinner and voices the table, really talking about the art scene in New Zealand and internationally. Ali, you know, was at my piano here. That was a Trade Me special that Pari found for $2,500. But he was playing the piano, jamming with a poet, Darren, where, you know, you know, who's originally from Fiji, and Ali's originally from Israel. And, you know, there was this, you know, great fabric, textured conversation from so many different cultures. And I thought, that's pretty amazing. That I might not get that in Connecticut.
I think it's really interesting listening to you as you've talked a lot, because it sort of feels like that building community is a real heart of kind of what you do, and kind of that real focus on cultivating community everywhere you've been and gone, be it to New York, be it to Connecticut, be it even in coming back to New Zealand, rebuilding your own community, but building and helping others. And I know that that's part of your newsletter as well.
Yes, the newsletter. So the Art Cafe blog. So in the States, at the Westport Art Center, which is now called MoCA, which means Museum of Contemporary Art, which is a pretty grand title, but in Westport, which is a very, cultured, a lot of New Yorkers not moved to Westport because it's on the coast. It's an hour from Manhattan, but they were in the arts, advertising the arts. They were writers, performers. Peter Unjen was the director of the Toronto Symphony, initially, first violinist for the Tokyo String Quartet, dear friends, like many friends. But that community was key. And as a single person, because I've been a single parent since the boys were 2 and 4 or 3 and 5, I'm not sure, but my community has always been key. Dear friends, raising children by yourself with no family like around, has been key. And I think artists are essentially isolated in their practice. So how do you give them a community? And so I think, and it mightn't, it wasn't Manhattan, but it was within an hour of Manhattan. But I could, with the amazing help of fantastic artists, help really create the community. So with it was, I think no man's an island entire of themselves. That's, John Donne. And that's true there, it's true here. And I think New Zealand, being so far away and isolated, has always been a difficult proposition for engaging internationally. However, with the pandemic, our doors opened, maybe not our borders, but to have these virtual realities, to be able to virtually connect, to really find ways of expressing ourselves, whether it's, can we do that with performing arts? When you can't have, the opera or the ballet, how do you present, or a play? How do you present that? So I think, these virtual webinars or podcasts provide an opportunity to have a borderless society, that the countries are without borders. Yes, we want to be able to travel, we want to stay safe too, but how do we have a balanced mix? And I think, being able to work from home is, maybe a better lifestyle, to have a mix. Yes, the water cooler is important. Yes, it's important to be in an office at some point, but you can also have a rich lifestyle and know that you're a click away. And I think that's been sort of a, for many people, around the world, that, how do you make sure people are not isolated? I think mental health is key, and the arts is a great platform for expression, whether it's culturally, social justice, environment, because the arts aren't providing answers. It's the arts, for me, is simply asking new questions. What if? The arts are, the Venice Biennale in particular was the first one that, sort of gave me an Einstein moment. Not that it was really Einstein, but it was more, when a friend said, I'll meet you in Mexico, or and I thought, we're going to that pavilion or that exhibition. There's a universal language of looking. You know, I could go to China and see works, not understand Mandarin, but I could look, I could listen. And I think that sort of basic looking and learning is so crucial. So the arts, visual arts, is about obviously aesthetic. How do you pull people in? And with Joseph Michael's work, yes, it's about environment and climate change. You know, it's horrific that these icebergs are crashing and collapsing. Yet when people see this marvelous, you know, installations, 42 floors high, with these utterly beautiful icebergs, and then hearing them collapse, it's sort of sugar-coated medicine, like, oh my God, what's actually happening? You're drawn in, but you don't need it to be sort of this, you know, hard-hitting piece of prose. And to see arts in a way where it remains, you know, compelling, that you're pulled in to hear a story. I just saw a film called Punch by Welby Ing, that Adrian Burr, wonderful New Zealand philanthropist, he sadly died a year and a half ago, but he helped fund this film. But it was also coming of age, being gay in a small town, you know, in a bigoted, you know, bully-like town in New Zealand. You know, how, you know, so there are all these stories to be told in a way that everybody can identify with the protagonist, and it could be us. And I think when we feel something, art works. And seeing Cinderella, which is a whole, you know, flipping of the plot, you know, it's a game, completely LGBT. It's but fun and whimsical and provocative. And then hearing from the trustees that they're providing a plan for dancers as soon as they retire at 35 or so. What then? Sports, you know, sportsmen, women have something, but what do dancers have? So, you know, what's the next step to be caring, to go, you know, so what programs are there that we can look at internationally? But they're doing very well by themselves. Perhaps other programs internationally can look at us. And so I was, you know, very, you know, I'm always impressed with what's going on in New Zealand. And I think the Writers' Festival's coming up. The film festivals just happened. So the Art Cafe blog started with the Art Cafe, where I would have guest speakers come in. Helen Clark actually came in a few times, where I had environmental artists, or Lindsay Adario. She's a New York Times photographer and is based in Ukraine at the moment. So Helen would come in, and it would be sort of like, much like we were doing, but you know, Helen would speak, Lindsay Adario would speak. So she was a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer. So not having the cafe, I thought I could continue with the blog. And it's a cherry picking of articles, whether it's in art news, art newspaper, The Guardian, New York Times, The Herald stuff, or asking Nadine Rubin to speak, you know, give me a story on Hold the Pickle, which is that was at Michael Lett Gallery, provocative show last week. But and I wished I'd written about Simon Denny, who was just the amazing New Zealand artist working in blockchain and the whole cyber space, NFTs. But yeah, the blog is a cherry picking of stories around the world and New Zealand. And then I might visit an artist studio or take a group of collectors around galleries and highlight, you know, whether it's Gary Langsford or Tim Melville or whichever galleries. And and I'm planning to invite more writers. My skill set's more in photography and cherry picking. I work with Laura Sheftel, who's an Oxford grad. She's young. She does a lot in the Art Lab as well. And she helps write the blog, or, you know, but it's a lot of my friends I like to feature. Simon de Poury's, founder of Philips, or just anybody that's got interesting Instagram handles. I'd like to sort of pull people's attention there, but use it as an asset. My whole mailbox of 200 emails a day at least is full of various links, heads up to include, of what's going on in the art world. So I might as well, see what's key.
Curate it.
And curate it. Exactly.
Wonderful. We've just got like 10 minutes to go, so I just wanted to open the floor if anyone had any questions. But one that's already popped through, which I think you've kind of sort of talked about, was really interesting, talking about how that fusion of art and technology, and how that can be so influential on communities. I think that incredible example that you were just talking about of the glaciers projected onto the building, great example of like you say, creating such an incredible talking point.
Yeah, I think, we're all curious, and I think with new technology, sure, there can be a gimmick, or not, but one of the highlights of seeing Amazon Raised Up Sky at Te Papa, that's just Michael's film about the Amazon, and Jen Raoul, who's a filmmaker whose husband was the composer, Ali Lieberman, presented this amazing, short documentary. But afterwards, there was an opportunity to look through these VR goggles and walk through part of the forest, which had been mapped, and to have a sense of what that feels like and looks like, and see root systems and water systems, and understand what energy is. I recently showed images that the grid in Wellington were presenting on wind data points that looked like a Van Gogh painting, but it was data points from the Wellington airport every day of last year. And, you're sitting in the space in a trance, feeling immersed and having some sense of the power of energy. Like, yes, we feel the wind now, but then to see it in an aesthetic way, controlled way, is very compelling and provides more questions. Like, well, how does this work? Let's explore. So seeing, I think there were 7 ambassadors from Latin America on the stage at Te Papa, walking around with their VR goggles, and and in the dark, so to speak, we were, as the audience of 350 were coming in, and it could have been quite a cranky time vis-a-vis Amazon, but it allowed people to be free to explore. And I thought, well, that's great, because that cuts through all the politics and helps provide a platform for more discussion. And then, so those immersive experiences, and they continue, is to how do you really sort of make them happen without huge cost. And I think as technology improves, the costs hopefully subside. But I do think technology, there's so much that's going on. And still, it's like cryptocurrencies with NFTs, some work, some don't. Artists really, hoping that there's a way that they retain royalties. So if it's in music or not, they always keep a piece of that blockchain. But I think technology should be an asset, but the basic mark making, that's so primal, should never be lost. Like, so how do you have that balance?
Gosh, that's really interesting. And then I guess anything else to add on kind of you returning to New Zealand? Any last kind of thoughts or a tip that you might be able to think of is that we could share with our kind of community who might be thinking about coming home?
Okay, so if you're coming home, and I would certainly make sure, if you've got the New York Times and the Guardian, the Post, you know, on their bookmarked, get the Herald and TV1 or stuff, just that you're becoming aware. So I watch TV1 every morning and flick to TV3 when it's, you know, but it's my Te Reo lesson and to begin with, to start the day. And I think, you know, I'm very fortunate. I have access to, you know, Te Reo lessons from AUT, but that have been offered that I need to take. But you know, working with Bob Harvey on one project, visiting Ngāti Whātua at Bastion Point, becoming, at the moment I came back, so very much a deep dive, you know, so really understanding that how vital this new New Zealand, this new Aotearoa, that's always been there, but finally has a voice and meaning, a poetic and spiritual meaning to the day-to-day of everyday life. So I think become familiar, and then when you do come back, say yes to everything. And I am just indebted to my family that coming back to New Zealand has been a precious time, and at the same time blessed with an incredible, you know, life in America and internationally, but that hopefully all the stars, whether you're in the Northern Hemisphere or the Southern Hemisphere, they shine just as brightly wherever you are. And just to be grateful for privilege, and to, if you have it, to give back.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Richard, thank you. He's also suggested the spin-off and newsroom and the RNZ app to keep in touch with New Zealand while you're afar as well. Thank you, Richard.
Oh yes, Radio New Zealand. All of it, or whatever, the listener. I mean, yeah. Denton, you know, actually, who does a great job is Brian Sweeney, The Edge. So absolutely, you kidding? No, but I'm just saying that it's you know, Simon Wilson, a great New Zealand writer. Follow him. Just go on their Instagrams or Twitter accounts. Helen Clark Foundation. See what's happening. See where the think tanks are working. Aspen Institute is another great one. You know, it's just because it's a dynamic New Zealand, and you know, it's not how it was when you left, except for the great parts. You know, your family and the incredible landscape and scenery, and meeting other, you know, just, you know, share those stories with other returnees. I loved meeting Peter Gordon and Alistair Carruthers at a key event, but to see how they have built up a cooking school, homeland, and a restaurant, and how they give back, and you know, sort of see how other New Zealanders are doing it, how Phil Veal gives back, you know, how people within your, you know, like you have come back to New Zealand, and I think that's, yeah, and I think to give back to IKEA, that's what, you know, to provide entree to entrance, but you know, and then segue home if you are coming home. It is a great place to raise children. There is no doubt.
Wonderful. Look, we've got 3 minutes to go, so I think I'll close it off there, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us this morning, Helen. It's been absolutely wonderful to have a chat, and we've got everyone's details. So I've actually got quite a few pics, which I wasn't able to drop into the chat. I thought I might have been able to, but I will send out some images and some links, and to everyone kind of post the call. But thank you so much for attending, everybody, and thank you so much, Helen. It's been a delightful chat this morning.
Very much, Ellie. And yes, sign up to the Art Cafe blog.
Yes, we'll add that into the mix as well.
Yeah, that'd be fun. But what's hot, what's not in the art world, and anything else. But no, but even from overseas, you can jump into the Writers' Festival. You know, because many podcasts are there. But yeah, I think keep straddled. You know, never lose your love for New Zealand, and it's always home.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye. Goodbye, Helen. Take care.
Bye.